Lesson 1-1, Expressions and Formulas. In this lesson, we will use the order of operations to evaluate expressions, use formulas, and simplify expressions. Over on the side here, you'll notice that the Iowa Common Core standards are also listed. So to begin with, we are going to go over some vocabulary terms, and then we will move on to examples. So to start with, a variable is a letter used to represent an unknown quantity or an unknown number. So typically we are familiar with X, Y, Z. We could also use A, B, C, or really any letter from the alphabet. Now an algebraic expression contains one or more variables. So an example of an expression would be something like 3x plus 5. Or 2x minus 7y. So those would be examples. We could also just have one term, so 4x could also be an example of an expression. Now when you are told to simplify, that just means that we are reducing something to be in simplest forms. So most of the time it's going to look like combining things together until we can't anymore. Now remember, when we are simplifying, it doesn't always mean that we're going to end up with a number for our final answer. For example, let's say we're simplifying 3x minus 2 plus 7x. So here we would combine the x's together, so that would be 10x. And then we can't combine that with anything, so we would still have that minus 2. So this would be our simplified expression. Okay, so not necessarily just one number. And to do all this simplifying and reducing, we have to remember our order of operations. So Pemdas is a way that we can remember it. So please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Now what this means is that we always start with parentheses. So P is parentheses. So we're going to see something like this. We could also see these brackets. So those are kind of the same thing. So we always start by simplifying those first. So we simplify the group. The next one is exponents. So E is our exponents. So we want to go through and evaluate all the powers. And then MD stands for multiply and divide. Now it doesn't mean multiply everything first and then divide. So this is where it gets a little tricky. But we are multiplying and dividing from left to right. So we do this at the same time from left to right. So these are really done together. Same thing with addition and subtraction. So A and S stand for addition and subtraction. And again, that is done from left to right. So these are done at the same time. And then don't forget too, distributing kind of falls underneath the multiplication and the grouping symbols. So we will also be doing that as well. Another important vocabulary term is evaluating. So when we evaluate, we are going to substitute in a number. Now it could also be an expression, but we're substituting something in to a variable, and then we're following the order of operations to simplify. Now again, depending on what we're substituting in, we are either going to end up with a single value at the very end, or we could also end up with an expression depending on if what we substituted in had variables. And then formula is just a mathematical sentence that expresses the relationship between certain variables. So if we think back to geometry, one of our most common formulas are area formulas. So like area of a triangle would be half times base times height. So that would be an example of a formula, and we can just substitute in the quantities that we know and simplify. All right, let's move on to some examples. So it's very important in math that you pay attention to what the directions are telling you to do, because that'll help you decide what methods you should use to approach the problem. So when it says to simplify, again, we want to get rid of all of our grouping symbols, so our parentheses, brackets, exponents if they're on a number, and then combine everything together until we can't anymore. So for this first set of simplifying, we have to be careful since we have all z's, but some of them have exponents and some do not. So when we are combining like terms, the variables have to be exactly the same to combine them, and then we're just combining the numbers in front. So for this problem, we're going to combine the z squareds together. So 5z squared minus 8z squared will give us negative 3z squared. And then we're going to combine just the z's together. Now when we look at this one doesn't have a number in front of it. So in this case, we always assume that that number is a 1. So that means that we're taking negative 10z plus 1z. So that will give us negative 9z. And then we can't combine these together anymore because this z doesn't have a squared with it. So this would be our final simplified answer. Now on the next one, we have a grouping symbol. So that means that we need to get rid of our grouping symbols before we can start combining like terms. So to do that, we're going to use our distributive property. So again, for this one, since there's not a number here, we're assuming that this is really a negative 1. So we're going to distribute the negative 1 to both of these. So that means we're multiplying. So this will become negative x minus y. And then here we have a plus, so this is a positive 2, and we're going to do the same thing. So we're distributing the positive 2 to both terms in our parentheses. So 2 times x is a positive 2x, and then 2 times a negative 3y will be negative 6y. And now we're going to combine like terms. So that means that we are going to combine our x's together. So again, this is really a negative 1x. So negative x plus 2x will give us 1x. And then we're going to combine our y's next. So here we have negative y minus 6y. So that will be the same as negative 7y. And we can't combine those together since we have different variables. So this will be our final simplified answer. All right, next set. So we don't have any grouping symbols. So now we're just going to look for like terms. And when we're looking at this problem, again, we have square terms and we also have non-square terms. So we have to be careful about what we're combining together. So if we start with the square terms, we have 3 of them this time. So again, we're just going to combine the numbers in front. So 2 minus 4 would give us negative 2. And then negative 2 minus this invisible 1 is going to be negative 3. So negative 3x squared. And if you have to do that in a couple steps, that is also fine. And then now we want to combine our x's. So we have a 5x and again that 1x. So 5x plus 1x is 6x. And we can't combine those any further, so this is our final simplified answer. All right, next one. So again, we have grouping symbols, so we have to distribute this time. So if we start with the first one, we are distributing in, so multiplying each of those by negative 2. So negative 2 times r is negative 2r. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. And then we go to our next group and do the same thing. So we have to remember to distribute this negative to everything in that grouping symbol. So I'm going to write a 1 here to remind us. So negative 1 times 2r is negative 2r. Negative 1 times 2x is negative 2x. And now we're combining like terms. So let's start with the r's. So we have a negative 2r and a negative 2r. So if we combine those together, that gives us negative 4r. And then for the x's, we have a negative 2x and a negative 2x. So if we combine, that will be negative 4x. And since we have different variables, there's nothing else that we can do to simplify. So this is our final answer.